So I think it's a fundamental truth. People hate change. I mean, normal people hate change, especially when you say, hey, I want to build a new apartment building on your block. Then they really hate change, especially if you're going to do something that's different from what was there before. But for some reason, everyone who works in the real estate business is a little strange, maybe even has a screw loose, in that we actually do that. And we do that even though the resistance is incredible. The cost is unbelievable. The amount of time it takes to get anything done, anything planned, anything approved, it takes years sometimes, many years sometimes to see something happen. And even by the time you get to the end, it sometimes can feel like a compromise. You're not getting exactly what that great vision might be. It is a laborious, difficult, painful process. And the amount of people that tell me that they can't possibly build affordable housing because it's just too expensive. They can't possibly do sustainability because it's just too difficult and uncertain. They can't possibly build in New York because, God, New York is hard to work with. And yet there are people who do. There are people in our business that pull it off and have been pulling it off year after year, project after project.
You are listening to the AFIRE podcast, real estate, technology, cross-border investing, and the opportunities of a changing world. Let's start a conversation now.
And I wanted to take some time today on the podcast to talk with a seasoned developer in New York City that has done all of the above, all of the impossible things that are there. David Kramer, of course, he's the president of Hudson Companies in New York City. They have a long list of accomplishments, all done, I think in some ways, many of them you could have said at some point in the project were impossible. So I'm hoping to unlock David's secrets today. So thank you, David, for joining me on the AFIRE podcast.
It's a pleasure to be on the AFIRE podcast, Gunnar. And my only quibble is that when you say seasoned, I hear old.
Oh, come now. We're all seasoned here. I wouldn't worry about that at all. What I'd love to get, though, just to kind of start, lay the groundwork here. Why on earth are you in real estate? What's wrong with you? Why are you in this business?
I quibble with all of your assumptions there. Everybody wants to be in real estate. Bankers want to be in real estate. Baseball players want to be in real estate. I bumped into a friend on the street the other day, and he introduced me to his 9-year-old kid, and he said that his kid was interested in real estate. And I said, "Get in line, kid." And first of all, real estate is like the real estate pages are like the sports pages of the middle class. And so I find everybody is pretty obsessed with real estate. Now, doesn't mean it's not hard and challenging and, it's everybody's business. But, I find it to be quite fun. I still have a skip in my stride coming to work. And I think it's partially because it is a 3D puzzle doing real estate. And it's very complicated. And all of the different elements that go into being a successful developer, whether it's finance, marketing, design, politics, community, brownfield, environmental issues, sustainability, property management issues, landlord-tenant law. It's so multifaceted. That's what I find interesting, and it's a great career for a generalist, which is how I think of myself. And so I'm not too smart in any one particular matter, but I'm pretty good at picking up, coordinating with 25 different industries.
So as a generalist, what do you think? Well, maybe speaking to that boy that is interested in becoming a real estate giant in his future, what do you think is required of you beyond being curious and open to a lot of different disciplines and being able to do it? But what are the aspects that you think that keep you going?
Well, real estate's a big tent, so there are a lot of different types that flourish in our industry. There are the straight up capitalists who are profit oriented and have a certain take on real estate. And there's a skill set there. I would say, just focusing on the little Hudson shtetl we have here, that if there's anything that sort of binds us as a group, is that we are urbanists. We are focused on the life and breadth of the city. If we haven't read about Jane Jacobs and Robert Moses, we come from a background working for the city or for nonprofits. A lot of people here started out working in some of the acronym groups, HPD, HDC, EDC, that sort of thing. My background is working with SROs on Skid Row. I think all of us live in the city. We're not commuting into work in New York City from Westchester. And so we have a commitment to, fondness of, appreciation of the life of the city. And everything sort of flows from there.
So how you've defined it a bit, but what would be the quick way to best define what an urbanist is? What makes an urbanist?
That's a great question. I would say an urbanist is an advocate for urban living, which suggests, in the case of New York City more than others, mass transit, living together, cooperating together in a communal setting. It's sort of the opposite of the fenced area. It's the opposite of sort of being a libertarian, and it's sort of engaging in community. That's the way I think of an urbanist, and sort of accepting the puzzle of retail, residential, office, industrial, parks, schools, all in the same general cluster, and enjoying that energy.
Why is clustering all that together a good idea? What's the answer to folks that still believe it needs to be spread apart?
Let's take the case of David Kramer. I walk out of my house, and within a few blocks, I can walk my dogs to a dog park. But I can also walk down the street and be at a Key Food in a block. I can be at a Barnes and Noble in 2 blocks. I can be at a Starbucks in 3.5 blocks. I can be at 7 or 8 subway stops in 6 or 7 blocks. And so there's an enormous quality of life boost that I'm not getting in the car and driving everywhere. I'm seeing my neighbors. I'm talking to my fellow dog walkers. I'm bumping into people in the street. And there's an enormous energy you get from that. It's not for everybody. But I'll tell you a funny story. I was once walking down the street, walking my dog, holding a poop bag. Somebody took a picture of me from behind and tweeted to say, to all those people who say, like, people in the city isn't the real America. It's the people living in cities that have to work so closely and act responsibly to, like, make sure you clean up your own dog's shit, as opposed to in the suburbs where my brother just lets his dogs. It's way easier to own dogs in the suburbs where you just let them, in the backyard. And so this person was making a case with my dog poop bag and myself and my dog that people who live so close in proximity to each other in the city really have to follow a whole set of rules and laws to get along. And anytime anybody ever complains to me about New York City, whether it's that there are subway issues or trash issues, my usual first rebuttal is always, it is a miracle this place works. The trash gets picked up. My trash gets picked up three times a week, and I compost on Monday. And the trains come, and they are graffiti free, and they're air conditioned. And there is a lot about the chaos of a 8-9 person city that is successfully addressed in our city. And what you are hearing right now is the voice of an optimist,
right?
The glass half full guy. And that's also part of the DNA of being a developer. You have to assume things are getting better. You have to look at problems and not wilt. I just had on Wednesday, I had our monthly staff lunch, and I shared a Winston Churchill quote that I had seen the day before that spoke to me. And the quote from Churchill is that success is the ability to go from failure to failure without losing your enthusiasm. And I think that in real estate, things go wrong constantly in construction, in financing, in entitlements, and you have to, and once you lose your enthusiastic, optimistic edge, you might as well go into digital marketing because you've lost your mojo. You really
Lost
have
your mojo.
to.
Well, I think your point is well taken in terms of how miraculous any city is. It is just like any construction project or development project. It is infinitely complex. The opportunities for failure are legion, and yet, for the most part, it happens. And yet, we take it all for granted. It's very easy to just get mad that instead of having 3 trash pickups a week, that maybe they miss one, and we all get all flipped out. But actually, it's pretty great that happens, that it happens as well as it does. And I think that brings it right back to any individual project as well, in terms of, I think we take for granted that the building is there and that it works. And yet all these systems have to come together. All these different disciplines have to come together, ranging from certainly, the capital formation, the planning, the negotiating, to just the fact that the wall system has to work with the floor system.
What's an interesting element of that, being in the construction business, is that when you think about a building being built, the general contractor, the owner hires a general contractor. Usually the contractual obligation is just the general contractor. The general contractor is hiring the super and the laborers and the project manager, but usually isn't self-performing a whole lot, is hiring subcontractors. So what you have in a building is, it's almost like its own mini city, which is that you have all of these individual independent businesses, subcontractors, who are not linked by common ownership. It's not as though everybody working in the building works for the same contractor. You have the plumber, the electrician, and the drywaller, and you hope that like fistfights don't break out, and that they learn how to work well together and coordinate, where the sprinkler pipe goes compared to the header, compared to the HVAC duct. And if it's a marvelous symphony, you have a building that works at the end, but there's a lot of effort that goes into it, because nothing is guaranteed in life or in construction coordination.
I always challenge people to look at a building not as bricks and mortar or whatever you make the building out of, but as a series of agreements, a lot of agreements that have to take place between a lot of different parties, some formal, some informal. And if you don't set up the agreements appropriately, there's a good chance that you're going to have more of a chance of it not working as it comes together. And that's not just to get it built; that's to keep it running.
Yeah.
I think, I'm often overwhelmed by how quickly a building will fall apart if it is not occupied.
We're not well maintained.
Right. I'll never forget, as a kid, my family lived in a place that was across the way from an abandoned village. And when we first moved in, I assumed, because it was ruins, it was just these bits of sticks in the ground, that it had been abandoned for decades. It had only been abandoned for 2 years. That's all it takes. So I think your point is taken. It's an ongoing series of agreements, a lot of people that have to learn how to work together, even though sometimes they irritate each other like crazy. How do you make all that work? You need to be an optimist, but it seems to me you also need to be a peacemaker as well, or a negotiator between various parties.
Of course, there's a sense in the world that the developer is in charge, that the developer is sort of leading the parade. Like, damn developers, my rents are so high.
Right.
I sort of see it as though the developer is at the back of the parade, holding onto the rope, being dragged along, holding on for dear life, trying to basically ride the wave of the market. So the rents are high because the market has attributed value to this location, or there's not enough supply. It's not that the developer builds a building and miraculously rents are higher, because plenty of times developers build buildings and it doesn't work out the way they would like it to. And so you have to have a lot of humility as a developer to say, to realize, like, in many ways, you are the middleman. You're the middleman between the architect and the contractor, between the lender and the city. There are a lot of different principals who have requirements far stronger than you, and you're trying to navigate it.
I think it makes sense then to ask the following question, which is, all right, it's hard enough, but you're also trying to do, in many cases, affordable housing in one of the most expensive cities in the world. So how do you take it up to 11 there and somehow create something that's affordable in an environment that is not designed for affordability?
Well, that works both ways. So, for example, when we're trying to get entitlements, when we're going through a New York City process called ULURP, where you're getting a discretionary approval, the fact that you have an affordable housing project allows you to walk on water, where you don't have the same pushback that you have on the market rate side. For the most part, there would be some neighborhoods where there'd be pushback against affordable housing, but for the most part, so many of the elected officials want to see affordable housing. If you're bringing them a market rate project, they're pushing to have more of the project allocated to affordable housing. That really the challenge in affordable housing comes down to the subsidies required to make the projects work, because your cost structure is the same.
Right.
And so if you're providing rents at 40, 30, 50, 60% of AMI, strong below market rents, you have to put together a bewildering array of funding sources to allow the project to pay for itself. The main ones used in New York City is a combination of a federal program called the Low Income Housing Tax Credit, and then either bonds issued by the city or the state, and subsidies issued by usually the city. And you're basically layering a bunch of different programs in order to end up with a pro forma where there's minimal debt on the property at the end of the day, so that you can allow yourself to charge lower rents.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the trick with affordable housing, is understanding all of the different programs and how long they take to get in the queue and what their criteria are. And on one hand, it is a good business. You're not only helping people and building affordable housing, but it's a way to earn a developer fee and pay your staff. On the other hand, it is enormously complicated, which means fewer people go into it, because there are far more options in real estate to get involved with lower barriers to entry than trying to understand affordable housing programs and get in with New York City housing groups. And so it cuts in all sorts of different ways. But most people who get into affordable housing are into it because they have a commitment to having, sort of leaving the city a better place than we found it, and that involves having housing that's affordable to to all income groups.
You can't be a complete evil capitalist and engage with that, because it's not the path of least resistance. But it helps us get more housing, which is fantastic. And yet, the other aspect of development that I always find the most entertaining is the resistance from the neighborhood itself, and that's a partner as well.
You must not be that involved if you say it's entertaining. It's entertaining when you're in the gallery watching David Kramer get insulted.
Well, I point taken. It's more of a horror movie than comedy. But how have you learned, other than just having a very thick skin, how have you learned to deal with kind of the resistance in those wonderful town hall meetings and everything else, where everyone talks about how evil you are as a developer for coming in and trying to build something?
Yeah, no, it helps to have a sense of humor. It helps to have thick skin. And I've actually reached the conclusion over the years that when people are coming up to the mic and foaming at the mouth and talking about your development, I've actually reached the conclusion that for them, it really isn't about your project. Something is going on in their life where they need to sort of latch on to this group or this protest, or sort of invest in the anger or the frustration of that group appeals to them, and what itch they have in their life that needs scratching, and that a lot of it. I'm not saying it's not that it's not authentic, but that at the end of the day, it's not really about what is my projects often become a convenient object of folks' frustration. But the frustration might be with the 2024 economy. The frustration might be with getting older. The frustration might be about, dissatisfaction in their family life. And so a building is always a convenient way to have an outlet for that frustration. There's not a community meeting where you can go up and yell about if you're unhappy with the modern economy. But if there's a project, that's a good opportunity to yell at somebody. And so, there is that dynamic, and you go into it eyes wide open and try to understand really, where the elected officials are in this, how sensitive or impervious they are to these issues, and try and handle the substance and hope for the best. And for the most part, it's worked out on all the projects I've worked on. Can I say 100% of the time? I guess it would be 100% of the time. I mean, if something really didn't work out, and you see this from time to time, where like a project is withdrawn or it goes down in flames with a negative vote, that would have such huge adverse financial impact. For example, I did a high profile project a couple of years ago. Went through it's called One Clinton. It's a 38-story condo. We ended up building a new library branch for the Brooklyn Heights Library. We ended up with an interim library that we built for them. We built 120 units of affordable housing off-site. We built a STEM lab for the city's Department of Education. It was a big, messy, fun, complicated project. And at the very end, when it was coming down for approvals, if we hadn't gotten approval from the New York City Council, I think our group would have been out some crazy number like $10 million. Wow. So at some point, failure isn't an option, because you have to figure out a way to prevail. And every now and then there is some disastrous project. It doesn't happen that frequently. It happens enough to scare the bejesus out of all of us who are in the industry. But what you really want to do if you're trying to learn and get better is not put yourself in that position. You really can't put yourself in a position where you are opening yourself up to the vulnerability of a discretionary review when you have so much non-refundable money invested. That's a place you don't really want to be.
One of the things I find interesting about how you've approached some of your projects is the remarkable amount of transparency to the public about the process you're going through. You've even written a book on it and blogged about it and helped people. What is it, do you think, that regular folks that are not in the real estate business, what is it that they get wrong about what you're doing? And what is it that you have had some success helping them understand about how this process works and where it goes?
Yeah, I mean, the real estate industry has lost the PR war. We didn't lose the battle, we lost the war. People think real estate developers are assholes, and Trump did not help that perception. And so when we start the conversation, we're already behind in the count.
Yeah.
And so, nobody thinks the developer is, arriving on the white horse. And so, it helps to try and be as open or educational, open the kimono, trying to be transparent. All of that stuff helps you try and make your arguments when there's a discretionary approval. And oftentimes it comes down to like, what's the economic impact for the city? We're doing a project in Westchester now in a city called Pelham. And normally if we were in any Westchester city trying to get a rental project approved, they'd be torturing us left and right. In this case, part of the project is we're building for the city. We're building a municipal hall. We're building a new fire department, and their firehouse is falling down. We're building them a new police department. We're building them a new town hall. We're adding a tax base on the rental side. We're renovating parking. And so all of a sudden that sort of changes the dynamic where it's not just a one-way battle. Hudson does a lot of complicated public-private partnerships And one of the reasons we do them is that there's a lot more hair, there's a lot more complexity, so there's less competition. There aren't people lining up to be in complicated public-private partnerships that can take years to, get to the starting line or the finish line. I've also done a lot of work over the years with New York City institutions. We've built housing for Sloan Kettering and Weill Cornell and NYU and Cornell Tech. And a lot of times with nonprofit institutions, you have to be incredibly patient. They have one committee has to check with the next committee. This subcommittee has to opine on it. And so again, a lot of real estate people don't have the patience for that. They'd rather not be in that world. And so that, sort of clears the playing field for, the few of us who have a few screws loose to take on projects that require patience. I like to joke that we are the opposite of a bond trader. A bond trader, boom, 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 they make a deal. Right. They come home and they tell their partner at the end of the day, this is how I did it. And I have a project right now that big Bronx affordable housing project, multi-phase. We got designated by Michael Bloomberg in 2013. So that's 11 years ago, and we still have 2 buildings to build. I have a project in the Gowanus that got sidetracked by the Superfund designation of the Gowanus Canal. We were designated by the city to build, I think 2007 maybe. So that was 17 years ago. And so, there are a lot of projects that take a very long time. And, that's part of the business model, is that you have a pipeline and that eventually it'll happen, and you have to, continue to go along. One thing we have at the Hudson Companies, which I instituted a while back, is a bell that we ring for benchmark occasions. Because if you just celebrate a project at the very end, when you've completed the condo and you've sold your last unit, or you've completed the rental building and you leased your last apartment and you're done, and you ring the bell saying we completed the project, you are years too late, because everybody at that point is already checked out. They've already sort of moved on emotionally. Right. What you have to do in a real estate project, which can last for 4 years, is celebrate, the smaller achievements. When you sign the contract to buy the land, when you close on the construction financing, when you get your TCO issued by the city, the temporary certificate of occupancy. So we try and celebrate those benchmark moments along the way in development, because you can't wait to the end, and you need to enjoy the journey. And that leads to many Talmudic conversations at the Hudson Companies, where something will happen and we will ask ourselves, is this bell worthy? Because you don't want to cheapen the
no.
You don't want to cheapen the bell, but you want to have a festive, company environment.
One of the things that I think would be bell-worthy would be, the amount of work and the amount of successful work that you've done around sustainability. I saw something on your website that over 90% of your properties since 2007 have LEED status of some form or fashion. You have one of the largest passive buildings, the house at Cornell Tech on Roosevelt Island. You've done solar array projects that are massive. Tell me a little bit about why and how you're embracing sustainability.
It didn't start with me. It started with my younger colleagues, and it was their core values. There was one of my colleagues, when I hired her, this is going back probably 20 years, she told me that when she brushes her teeth, she turns off the water. Mm-hmm. At the time, that sounded revolutionary to me. I think I do that now. I think I've done it for a while. But when she told it to me, I was shocked. Like, wow, you turn off the water. She said, yeah, it's one of my core values. And so we have a lot of folks at Hudson, urbanists, where sustainability is, the issue. Climate change is the issue. You talk to, I have kids in their early 20s, and it's the existential angst that they, are very, very, very focused on. And so, at Hudson, that started a while ago. We built, when we built the Cornell Tech residential tower, it was, at the time it was built, the largest building in the world built to the standard of Passive House, which is the most energy efficient global standard around. It's the real deal. LEED, you can get away with stuff in LEED. You get points if you put in a bike room, but Passive House takes it up a notch. You have to you have the passive house police coming in after the fact, commissioning the building after the fact. I don't think LEED really spends that much time looking at a building once it's built and up and operating, but that's what passive house does. To show that the energy usage is at the incredibly low standards that they are setting out for you. In fact, I learned a couple months ago that project is in the Guinness Book of World Records as the largest passive house building in the world. So you are talking to a contributor to the Guinness Book of World Records. So that's why we do it, Gunnar. We do it for fame and fortune and for our celebrity in the Guinness Book of World Records. But we do it because none of us have a choice. We should all be doing it. We should all be turning off the water when we brush our teeth. We should all be turning off the lights when we leave the room, and we should all be building buildings that use a lot less energy because our planet doesn't have a choice. And it's been hot and humid in New York this week, and it's been 115 in Vegas, and they're shooting tourists with water guns in Barcelona. So we don't really have a choice but to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it seems to me that sustainable buildings also are sustainable financial arrangements as well. You've got something that's self-sustaining. So what do you think, if there's one thing that most people get wrong about this business that you think they need to understand?
I think the main misconception is that landlords determine rents when supply determines rents. Mm. And so, for the political parties out there called the rent is too damn high, the solution to that should not be chastising landlords and trying to limit rent increases. It should be increasing the supply. The New York State Legislature has done generational damage to the New York City housing stock by taking the punitive approach to trying to keep rental increases highly regulated, which is going to lead only to deferred maintenance and problematic conditions for a generation.
How many case studies of rent controls leading to poorer housing supply do we need? We have a couple hundred years of examples of it having that effect.
You don't need another report on the shelf. You need, you have there are more tenants that vote than owners, and if they have a chance to enact legislation that gives them the sort of temporary satisfaction that their out-of-pocket costs are not going to go up, that's worth
right.
That's worth the hype.
Well, let's hope that more people start to understand the unintended consequences of onerous rent controls and what that can do to us.
If they do, we will have the AFIRE podcast and Gunnar Branson to thank for helping keep our population educated, both here and around the world.
And if that's the case, I hope you'll let me ring your bell. I hope that would be a bell-worthy kind of thing to do.
That would be bell-worthy. If we change opinions, that would be bell-worthy.
Fair enough. Well, we've come to the end of our time here. So I think we could talk much more about this, and I hope perhaps we'll have another chance to do that in the future. But in the meantime, we've been speaking with David Kramer, president of Hudson Companies in New York City. Thank you, David, for appearing on the AFIRE podcast.
Thanks, Gunnar. Good talking to you.
You've been listening to the AFIRE podcast. Remember to subscribe on your favorite podcast subscription service, such as Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitchers, and others. AFIRE is not engaged in providing tax, accounting, or legal advice. No content in this podcast is to be construed as a recommendation to buy or sell an asset. Some information included has been obtained from third-party sources considered to be reliable, though AFIRE is not responsible for guaranteeing the accuracy of third-party information. The opinions expressed are those of its respective contributors and sources, and do not necessarily reflect those of AFIRE.